Hello, I'm Paul Wilkinson and we're filming from Kathmandu. I've been based here for 5.5 years making documentary series about Nepali culture and about shamanism. And today I'd like to show you some objects which relate to sexual energy in relation to giving offerings. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the anomalies with things like menstruation taboo at the same time where you've got vagina-shaped objects which are used for giving offerings. So I've got a selection of objects which relate to that, and I'll run through the meaning and symbolism of the objects and then talk a little bit more about how that fits into the culture. These are Yoni vessels. They're extremely old. This is probably 500 or older years old. It's made in copper. It's been hand beaten, and they're used for, and it has an inscription which I've not yet managed to translate. So they have a variation of these. This is a very large one, would have probably been used in an important temple or a very, very rich household, and they use them for a variety of offerings. So sometimes they have at dawn and dusk they fill them with water or with milk, and then they'll pour like this into the river, and that's a way of giving the nourishment back into the cycle of nourishment back into the earth, back into the river. So they have a whole process among the shaman where you have a lot of different types of water, maybe 100 different types of water and different names for those types of water, where for waterfalls and the intersections of rivers and rainfall and dew, and they actually have across Hindu, Buddhist and shamanic traditions, they have a process where they'll actually collect those water from particular lakes or particular rivers or particular intersections, and they'll give those to, they'll introduce them to each other. So they'll take the water from one river and give to another river. So these are used like that, and they're also used for things like milk and honey and flowers, sometimes in other tantric rituals, things like alcohol. And also importantly, they were used for menstrual blood. Now, that's something that has very largely fallen out of use in India and Nepal and across the Himalayas. It still goes on in some tantric environments, but you have this strange paradox of menstruation taboo. And so on the one level, you have the sacred feminine, so really important objects like this are part of the culture, they're part of various monuments. And at the same time, you have a type of blindness to it where women are excluded and girls are excluded from school when they're menstruating. They have to go outside and sit in a hut in all weathers. They're not allowed in the house, they're not allowed to cook, they're not allowed to touch the male members of their families. So you can see this is a very ancient tradition of balancing the male and the female energy. And so you have these sort of weird paradoxes within the culture. So I'll show you the variations of these. So this is, they have them where some of them have a lingam inside. So you can see the first one I showed you has no lingam. This one has like a raised nipple in the middle, and that's like a Shiva lingam. And here's a stone version of the same thing. So you have a Shiva lingam in the middle, and then the Yoni vessel. This was part of a shamanic equipment, part of their main kit, and it would have travelled like a travelling altar. A Tibetan version, so with like a yin-yang Tao symbol for male, female and child principles. So relating to the body. The male is the masculine, the feminine is the heart, and the child principle is the belly. So in processes like Tai Chi, you have that cycle of energy between the male, female and child, and you want to keep all those aspects of yourself in good communication and working harmoniously together. If the mind is too insistent on stuff and it is not listening to the heart, then you're not really happy emotionally. If the body is really impulsive and following its drives, then also that can lead you astray. If the heart is all over the place, that can also cause problems. So you need a state where the receptive heart is first, then you sink that down into the body so that the energy of the heart is listened to and experienced in a wider sense with the emotions, and then you bring the mind in and then the spirit, and that's a way of keeping everything sustainable. So those processes are central to Tantra and to yoga and to Tibetan Buddhism, to Bon, to shamanism and to Hinduism. And yet you have the mental aspect of things like Hinduism have suddenly put these taboos, or not suddenly, over time have put these taboos into the culture. This sort they describe as not virgin, and the closed ones like that as virgin. So you can see you've got the Yoni vessel again. They're very, very sensual, beautiful objects. And I'll show you a little bit more variety. This is a much bigger, very, very nice. So over the last 5 or 6 years, I've been working with groups of tantric practitioners, yogic practitioners, mainly in the West, where they've started using these vessels for things like menstrual rights. So in the West you have a whole new resurgence of interest in the sacred feminine, in the inner goddess coming out and becoming powerful within the culture, becoming powerful individually and amongst groups of women, bringing out the very best of themselves. And then also, that's very important for the sacred masculine, also needs to come up and not be feminized. It needs to actually have a balance. So you want a man to be a proper man and you want a woman to be a proper woman, and they need to have the balance of, so a man needs to be emotional, they need to be receptive and playful, but you also need to have a proper understanding of that aggressive drive that allows you to focus on something and go and do something. And the same with the feminine, the sense of being able to be really patient and nurturing is, and that attention to the overall well-being of an environment is super, super important. And those things are also being pressed aside as women are trying to be more masculine in order to compete in a modern environment. This is a stone pestle and mortar, and it's used for herbs, it's used for things like ginger, and interestingly I have actually quite a sacred object that I'm using to grind stuff up. It's a Shiva eye, and it's a sort of seen as a magical object representing Shiva, but I quite like the appropriateness of the vagina and the masculine element being kept together in both a sacred and a mundane way. So that I'm using every day in my cooking. Here's a metal cast iron medicine vessel used for seeds and herbs and bark. This is very, very old, maybe 300, 400, 500 years old, which are used like that. So this is then the masculine and the feminine. You see the sort of vagina vulvic aspect of that. This is a shamanic mixing vessel. And another vessel of this unbelievably heavy, cast and used for grinding up herbs. These are shamanic pieces that were a part of a shamanic herbal herbal setup. Then within the culture also you have, you think you've got the Shiva lingam as part of a shamanic setup. This was given to me by a very powerful shaman. It was one of his most sacred objects, and I've been working for many years with the shaman, more than 25 years, and coming here for more than 20 years. And so this was, someone gave me a Tamang shaman, and it's a natural stone, but you see you have the vagina shape here at the bottom and the lingam shape here. It has a tremendous energy because it's been passed down for generations and generations and generations. He said his great-grandfather had it, and probably it went back more and more and more. You can feel the amount of wear on it where it's been handled, and you still have the sort of tika and things. This is on my own shamanic shrines. So that's a natural version of the same symbolism, the same thing. In Bhutan, you have objects like this, which are penis and vagina, and they're seen as sacred objects that bring good luck, bring fertility and abundance to the family. They even have, these are smaller Bhutanese penises made of deer horn. This is also Bhutanese. The Rai people also use another version where they add pubic hair. But this is absolutely part of the culture. And yet you have menstruation taboo. You have temples which are sacred to the feminine where girls aren't allowed in them. It's sort of, the inconsistency is sort of mind-boggling. So related to this, you have, so this again is seen as a sort of feminine vessel. This is made of shaga mushroom from you get them like plates that come out from the trees, and they're made of they're very good for herbal medicine. But this is for serving up herbal medicine. It's for, so after you've mixed in one of these vessels, you mix it in the vagina vessel. This would be seen as the lingam again, the masculine. Then you put this in, and this is what it's dispensed through the feminine. The feminine is giving the healing, renewing energy and power. You see the masculine penis amongst the meditating figure, and the nagas protecting. So the nagas associated with water and with water and with the power of the earth. So in this situation you have the masculine ram, and then the feminine of the earth and the water, and then the masculine figure with the erect penis. And then in places like Bhutan you have the deer horn, which is seen as a sort of vitality, carved into a good luck penis to bring abundance and for protection. So they'll even attach these to the outside of their houses. And then this is also Bhutanese with his matching vagina. I was just in a very strange situation where I was bringing a few of these across Kathmandu, and there was a lot of security because the Chinese president was here, and the army checkpoint with their machine guns stopped me late at night, and they said, "What's in the bag, sir?" What was in the bag were these. This is a very rare type of singing bowl with a Shiva lingam. It's called a lingam bowl. These are used in they're used in marriage ceremonies. So the bride's family will give this, and you have it's to ensure the fertility of the woman and that they have children. So you have the feminine aspect of the bowl and the masculine aspect. Interestingly, this is obviously from Hinduism or pre-Hinduism. It's very largely fallen out of use amongst the Hindus, but has remained in some of the very traditional Muslim communities. So there are Muslim communities in parts of India where they're still using these ancient lingam bowls, and also other areas which have, like the headhunters in Nagaland, are still using these lingam bowls. But amongst the Hindu and Buddhist community, not so much. So it's an interesting anomaly of history. So you have in the same figure, a little bit like a yin-yang, you have a mother with a baby, an open vagina, in a sort of praying type position, the masculine figure praying with an erect penis. So you have this vital sense of fertility and renewal and energy coming from nature and being present in everything. So and with a real sense of balance and harmony. And this is one of the things that's particularly wonderful about shamanism, that the shamans seek to balance everything. They seek to find a unity between the male and the female energy and the child energy. So one of the shamanic teachers is a character called Banjakri, and he's often depicted training children, young children, where they come and they stay with him in his golden cave, and his wife is a queen of the witches. So she, in this case, she's an evil character, and she's trying to find the children to eat them, and he's using all sorts of clever magic and tricks and humour to hide the children. Well, this is interesting because it's like bringing out it shows the relationship of the masculine to the feminine, and the masculine to the child principle, in terms of letting the child principle come up. So the masculine is shielding the child principle and allowing it to be, in this context, allowing it to play, allowing it to experiment, allowing it to explore. And he's hiding the children from the devouring mother. In this context, the devouring mother is the control. So children need to explore, and they need to make mistakes, and they need to do risky stuff. Not so risky that they hurt themselves or kill themselves, but risky enough to grow and know where their edges are. So this is pretty important, and it's absolutely central to the creative energy and to the shamanic energy. The other side of that, and the difference between shamanism and the negative aspect of witchcraft, is the negative aspect in this context is the control. So if the feminine tries to control the child principle as it's exploring, as it's expanding, as it's expressing itself in the world, then you have compulsion. It's actually very key in terms of something like Western democracy, that the freedom of the individual, particularly in English-speaking democracy, the freedom of the individual is open-ended. So the individual is held to be the highest principle in the culture, higher than the state, higher than the king, higher than the law. The law is used as a way of regulating the potential for harm, and wherever there isn't harm, the assumption of goodness, the assumption of the right of the individual and the freedom of the individual, is the presumption of innocence is present. So the opposite of that is state control, where you have then you have to describe everything. Describing the size of the apples, like the EEC, describing the size of apples and fruit, and regulating seeds, and at the moment trying to regulate herbal medicine. If people, you need to be able to trust people to do their best. People don't want to poison each other. They actually want to do good. and to help them and heal them and so on. And it's very, very important to have that open sense of awareness when you're approaching things, both culturally, spiritually, politically, environmentally. You need to assume innocence, assume well-being. So when I approach nature, for instance, I don't know everything in nature. There's unbelievable complexity in the variety. And I think as a general principle, if you're holding the idea that variety is healthy, like eco-diversity, one way to tell whether a river is healthy or not is the amount of life that's there. You don't want a monoculture, you want an absolute teeming variety with the maximum amount of things, and that lets you know that everything is in its own, everything has found a balanced niche. And the shamanic world is very, very much about making that balance between themselves and the harmony of the environment, the harmony between people within a community, the health within the body, the way in which the internal organs work, the way in which the energy systems work, the way your emotions work with your thinking. And so this is present. You can see another lingam bowl used in marriage rites. So this is present throughout Asian culture, and it's a strange thing that some of this has got transported to the West and is coming back again through a type of renewal. So one of the things that I take most pride in and that I find most valuable about my work is that, for instance, I'm bringing these vessels to tantric yogis in the West who are now using them for menstrual rites to raise up the awareness of feminine power as the goddess. And interestingly, that's coming back into this culture again and filtering back into the sense of awareness and consciousness within the culture. So having sacred objects to practice with is a way of physically embodying a thought form. So when you contemplate this, it's more than a physical object. It's actually a piece of conceptual technology. It's an idea that's embodied into a physical object that represents something, which is symbolic at the same time as representing. So when you look at this, it's quite vulvic. If you can see the vagina in it, and yet it also describes the action. And one of the beautiful things about Asian culture is that descriptive technology in terms of the sacred objects relating to the way you do stuff is incredibly rich. So we have a technology of stuff. We have a technology of, with machines and jet engines and computers and mobile phones. They have a technology of consciousness, a technology where the objects are about the way you interact with the material world and the way in which those material things are part of your internal dynamic. So I hope if you found that interesting, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, and do let me know if you're interested in any other in me talking about any other subjects, and I'll do my best to make a video for you. Thank you.